Welcome once again to the Waters and Stanton video channel. My name's Peter Waters, call sign G30JV. And I'm going to talk today about how during lockdown I migrated from the HF bands to do a bit of VHF operation using the ICOM IC-9700. Before I talk about that, a little story. You know, during lockdown, I turned out one or two things, all sorts of goodies I found in cupboards and so forth. But I came across a QSL card. You see that G30ZR? Put it on the desk there so you can see it. Now, G30ZR was a ham radio operator. He lived in Romford in Essex. And I first heard him on the air back in probably 1959 when I was still a youngster and a shortwave listener. And I don't know how I got in touch with him, but I did get in touch with him because I really wanted to see an amateur station. I don't know how I may have sent him a QSL card because I was registered as A2065. That was an associate member of the RSGB, and you were given associate numbers, like a sort of a listener call sign, I suppose. A2065 was my number. I've got a QSL card somewhere. If I find it, I'll put it up on the video. Anyway, I got in touch with G30ZR, Ted Womack. Very nice guy. I believe he was a carpenter. And I'm pretty sure that he was a motorcyclist. I'm not sure he had a sidecar, but I'm pretty sure he was a motorcyclist. Anyway, I got invited over to his house, and I think it was the first time I'd actually been to a live amateur radio station. And he was a really helpful guy. I mean, he sort of explained what was going on and so forth. And I don't remember this, but I'm looking at the QSL card. I do now know that he had a CR100 receiver, and on 160 meters he had a home-built transmitter, VFO and PA, which was a very common combination in those days. But yeah, he was very helpful to me, and I used to go to rallies when I was a youngster. I'm not sure I got to those rallies. Maybe by that time, 17, I passed my driving test. I don't know. Anyway, he used to be at the rallies, and he was a really helpful sort of guy, and he certainly would encourage ham operators. I lost contact with him. I don't know what happens. I mean, he probably was still on the air, but anyway, I lost contact with him, and I moved on. Then I got married, and I moved house, and then I moved down to Hockley and so forth. And lots of time went past. I'd started the ham radio business, etc., etc. Anyway, I was invited to give a talk at a ham radio club based near Harwich, and I drove down to Harwich and got to this club, and as these club events normally happen, that the chairman or the secretary stands up and says a few words and discusses what they're going to do and what has happened and so forth, and then I would be called on to do a talk about whatever I spoke about. So while all this was going on, I picked up a copy of the club sort of magazine, or little leaflet they do once a month. And I was reading it, and I suddenly saw the call sign G30ZR, and I thought, well, G30ZR? I mean, this is a call sign from the past. He must be long dead now. And I was sort of transfixed with him, like, G30ZR. Anyway, I said to one of the club members, who obviously wasn't listening to what was going on, I said to him, G30ZR, who's he? He said, oh, over there. And it turned out that the new owner of the call sign, G30ZR, was a family member, and he'd taken over the call sign. But it was quite something, after a span of about 50 odd years, to suddenly see a call sign, which I'll never forget. Ted Womack, G30ZR, great guy. Never forget that call sign. But it was amazing to sort of suddenly see out of the blue the call sign again, and of course it is live again, so that's good. I had a conversation with a few old timers about three months ago now, and say old timers, well, yeah, we are old timers, aren't we? And we were talking about our favourite bands, and it's quite interesting that a lot of hams have got a favourite band. Very often they can't tell you why it's their favourite band. I suppose my favourite band, well, currently, would be 40 Metres. I think because it's open most of the time, it's good for portable operation. There's some DX to be had on there, particularly late evening and sometimes in the winter in the mid-afternoon. There's all sorts of things to be achieved on 40 Metres, and I don't know, it's a band that just appeals to me. The original favourite band, I suppose, was 160 Metres, but of course that was thrust on me because like all the new licensed hams back in the 1960s, 160 Metres was the local band. It was the band that you went on to keep in contact with all the people locally, clubs and so forth, and it was a band that had quite strong ground wave. The ground wave on 160 Metres is quite good. You'll go around, up to 20 or 30 miles quite easily. As soon as you go higher on 80 Metres, the ground wave is not nearly so extensive. So it's more difficult to keep in contact with local people. And once you go above that, the ground wave is very short indeed. So 160 Metres, you could put up a wire and put out a good signal with 10 watts to cover, 20 or 30 miles, which was fine. So that was my favourite band then. But then 40 Metres, as I said, became the favourite band. One of the guys in the groups was talking about 4 Metres, and 4 Metres has certainly got some addicts. And again, it's difficult to quantify what is the attraction to 4 Metres. If you're a 4 metre operator, I'm sure you'll tell me. But 4 Metres has an attraction. I used to operate on 4 Metres back in the mid 60s on AM, but it was a band of convenience. We did some mobile operation then. It was a sort of a first venture into a VHF mobile operation, I suppose. So for me, 40 Metres. 20 Metres came up again because it's a DX band. So we were sort of bouncing this around. What is the favourite band? And there was fors and against, and you were trying to put forward your argument for your favourite band, and somebody would come along and sort of say no, that my favourite band is this and this and this. And then we talked about VHF, and none of us really had operated VHF other than perhaps a 2 metre mobile or a 2 metre handheld. And I remember going back to, when was it? Probably the late 60s. I think I had an FDK 2000 or something like that, all mode 2 metre transceiver. And that was my first experience of 2 metres in terms of SSB operation. Now, during this conversation, we also talked about favourite modes. SSB dominated, CW came second, and FM didn't really sort of feature at all because it was seen as a mode of convenience for sort of chatting locally, but it wasn't a mode that really sort of grabbed you. And I've always been attracted to SSB and CW, and we were talking about 2 metres then, and I was saying, well, I operated on SSB on 2 metres. And I got thinking, I haven't been on 2 metre SSB for a long time. Now, I did do a video, 3 or 4 months ago now, where I resurrected, but I got working a 2 metre transverter with my Elecraft K3, and that was when I first sort of ventured onto 2 metres. But then I decided that if I was going to try 2 metres, I needed a proper transceiver setup. So I opted for the IC-9700. I suppose I've always had a soft spot for ICOM radios. I can remember the IC-202, the SSB portable transceiver from ICOM many years ago. But I've always liked the large display, and it took Yaesu quite a long time to catch up. They have caught up now, but that display is nice. Kenwood, well, I'm not sure what Kenwood's doing. The TS-2000 stopped production some while ago, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of any activity at all from Kenwood. So the really and truly, the bulk of the 2 metre activity now is really dictated by ICOM and Yaesu. I mean, there's a lot of used equipment out there, some nice used equipment as well, FT-897 and so forth, FT-857, still some Kenwood TS-2000s. But if we're talking about new equipment, then it's really a fight between Yaesu and ICOM. I don't mean a fight in a nasty way, but you know, we all have our preferences. And when I looked at the IC-9700, I suppose the thing that struck me was the panoramic display, the scope display, and the 100-watt capability on 2 meters. Now, Yaesu have got a scope display on their FT-9900, although it's only 50 watts. One of the things with ICOM 9700 is the SDR design, which is very, very good, and they've done extremely well to put an SDR transceiver into a radio that covers 2 meters and 70 sems. I missed out 23 sems because there's no SDR on 23 sems, it down converts. But nevertheless, it's quite a feat of engineering, and it means to say that the whole design is very flexible. Firmware updates are quite easy to implement. Well, so they're easy. They are readily available once they've been completed, and you can upgrade them. And talking about upgrading, on the front here there is an SD card slot which you can use to store the settings of the radio. You can use it for firmware updates, so you can use it for uploading repeaters. ICOM UK have a list of repeaters all sort of set up, so you put your SD card in there and load it up. I do like the display. The strange thing is that in some ways the 2 meter band is busier than you think it is. If you have a traditional 2 meter transceiver where you tune across the band without the scope, then you tune up and down the band and you may find some signals, you may not, depends what conditions are like, whether it's an activity night or whatever. But with the scope you can see immediately the activity, and I found stations tucked away that I would never have dreamt of. There was a QSO about a month ago taking place right down the bottom of the band, 144.03 or something like that. 2 local guys, but I would never have dreamt of going down there. And then the other night the band was basically empty except for a QSO on 144.375. Now, if I'd have been tuning around, I might not have gone up to 144.375. So the scope certainly helps. I do like SSB. The reason I like SSB is because it offers DX capability, and it's not you don't get the rubber stamp QSOs, and you can work quite weak signals. FM is great for local work, and with a memory set up there, it's very easy just to go through the memories, have some on FM and some on SSB. Personally, apart from the local repeaters, I prefer to sort of go on SSB or CW. Now, the other thing I found the other day was some CW at the bottom of the band. Now, there's not a lot of CW on 2 meters, but I spotted it on the scope, and it was I think it was the Colchester Club. Once or every so often they have a CW training session, and it's good on 2 meters because it's fairly quiet, and it was quite amazing for me to see this CW down there, which I probably wouldn't have bothered to tune down. So the scope really is quite a major part of the 9700, as indeed it is with, of course, the FT-991A. One of the very nice features about the IC-9700, of course, is the touch screen. You know, you can press a button there and you've got the menu items there. You press another button there, you've got some more menu items there. You've got page 1 and you've got page 2, and you can go in there and you can press buttons to do all sorts of wonderful things. There we've got the audio display up. So the touch screen is really great. Really is great. You can touch the frequency there and change the tuning speed. And talking about tuning speeds, what you can do is when you tune the 9700, if you start to tune fairly fast, it travels fairly fast. So if you want to whip from 1443 down to the CW end at the bottom, you start to tune fairly quickly, and you're down there before you know it. So that is very good for moving around the band. Now, I've only mentioned 2 meters because that's the only antenna I've got at the moment. I do intend to get operational on 70 SEMS, and I should probably use one of our dual antennas, which are the antennas that cover 2 meters and 70 SEMS on a single boom with a single feed. Check them out on our website, dual antennas, superbly made, and there is a video actually of Mike Devereaux, G3SED, assembling one of those antennas. So if you look on our video list, you'll see it there. If I was just going to operate on 2 meters, then I guess it would be quite an outlay, and you'd have 2 other bands, 2 meters and 70 SEMS, which you're not using. I think it's certainly an enthusiast's radio. My experience is that, of course, if you're a 2 meter operator on SSB or CW, almost certainly you're going to be operating on 70 SEMS and possibly 23 SEMS as well. So it means to say that for the VHF UHF operator, everything is in one box, and it's quite a small box as well. Even though you get your 100 watts on 2 meters there, 70 watts on 70 SEMS, and 10 watts on 23 SEMS. A question that we are quite frequently asked actually is, can the 9700 operate outside the bands? In other words, can you receive outside the bands? No, you can't. The 9700 is just for the ham bands only. You can't go outside the bands. So if you want to listen to the air band, you'll have to get a separate receiver. I do get a few burbling signals across the band, which you can probably see there. And these all seem to come from just up the road there. Around about a quarter of a mile away, there is a water tower on one of the highest points in Hockley, probably the highest point. And it's festooned with antennas, and if I turn my beam towards there, and they're not strong, but they're enough to actually show up on the display there. If I turn my antenna away, then the band becomes basically clear. And I also like the way that if you press the screen, you can go to see a signal that you've seen there, and it magnifies it, and then if you press it again, you're basically on that signal, or very, very close to it. One thing I should mention, of course, is that we have dual receivers on there. So, for example, we can have 2 meters there, and we can have 23 SEMS there, just by pressing the button. They are separate receivers, but you cannot work. You can't have dual receive on the same band. You can receive on 2 meters and 70 SEMS, or 70 SEMS and 23 SEMS, or whatever combination you like, provided it's not on the same band. I have enjoyed myself over the last 2 or 3 months with the 9700. It certainly seems to be very sensitive compared with my K3 and the Ellicraft transverter. It has the edge, that's for sure. But the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to try FT8, and the nice thing about the 9700 is that you can put the USB connection straight into the back of the radio. I've got a Mac computer, but looking on Google, I did manage to work out how to implement FT8, and it's interesting because you can have a band that is dead. You put out a CQ on FT8, and there's a good chance you'll get a reply. With a very modest antenna system, I've worked easily up to the borders of Scotland. Now, I have a simple antenna, which is a 5-element Yagi, but I do have the advantage that we're fairly well placed here in Hockley. So it's a good site. But I didn't want to use a big antenna. I wanted to see what I could do with a modest antenna. The sort of antenna that you might stick up in your garden without offending the neighbours. And I also deliberately on FT8 ran no more than 10 watts. So all the contacts I've had right up to the borders of Scotland have been on 10 watts. So you can do an awful lot with FT8. The downside of FT8, of course, is it's not very personal. There's other areas you can explore on 2 meters, meteor scatter, which you can do with the WSJT software, and altogether it's quite fun. I have actually had some interesting ragtues on 2 meters, which I wouldn't have done on the HF bands, because on the HF bands, because there's not a very strong ground wave, almost all the stations you work are some distance, 200 miles on 80 meters, sort of 300 or 400 miles on 40 meters, 1,000 miles, whatever, on 20 meters. So you tend to lose touch with the locals. So one of the advantages of being on a band like 2 meters is that you are also in touch with the local stations. On the rear you've got 3 antenna sockets, the USB input, accessory socket, CW, key, and the external speaker, sort of things you'd expect on the back of a radio. So there we are, that's the IC-9700. It's not a review. I'm not really qualified, I don't think, to review the 9700 because I haven't got an antenna system that would do it justice. But I have enjoyed it. I can see the potential. Before winter I want to put up a better antenna system and certainly add 70 SEMs, because I can see the potential then. And then of course the radios start to come alive and perhaps earn its living and justify the outlay. But there we are. So I hope this shortish video has been of interest to you. I think probably it's interesting for me to actually use bits of gear at home, because I can then identify with problems, I can identify with decisions you might need to make, and perhaps cover them in a video, or at least alert our sales staff, and perhaps do whatever's necessary in web descriptions and so forth. So, as usual, thanks for watching this video. Keep safe, keep in touch, and until the next time, take care. Yeah,